We have a few minutes to finish up your Tuesday terms bell ringer, and we'll go over that together. And today I actually have the correct vocab sheet.
Ooh.
Don't worry. Okay. Tuesday terms gave you the word accentuate on his resume. Scott went out of his way to accentuate his best traits and skills. What did you think accentuate means?
To express in great detail.
To express in great detail. And then when you looked it up, what was the definition?
Make noticeable, prominent.
Make noticeable, make stand out. Good. On the second one, it said the criminal hoped his disguise would bamboozle the police. What did you think bamboozle meant?
To trick or prank.
Okay, to trick or prank. And what did it mean?
To fool or deceive or cheat someone.
Good. Fool, deceive, cheat, bamboozle. You can put those away for tomorrow, Wednesday wise words. I have the real Unit 8 complete sentence sheet for you. So you'll need to pull up your vocab chart on Google Classroom.
Thank you.
This one should go a lot better. You'll be able to actually fill it in. Hopefully. Oh, and do you have your Chromebook?
Grammarly is your personal writing assistant for clear emails, confident messages, stronger essays, and more.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay, anyone need more time to finish up before we go over it?
I just need like a little bit more time.
Okay. Okay, let's go over these together. So the first one, I tried to answer yesterday. American society has become blank in its many culturally rich communities. Many different kinds.
Multifarious.
Multifarious.
Yupster.
Number 2, starting a new job or career can make a person feel blank until a routine is established and new responsibilities become familiar practices.
Omnivorous.
It can make you feel like you're going to eat plants.
Well, here's the thing. I couldn't find a single thing for omnivorous, and then also on omnivorous, it said eager to learn new things. Let me find it.
So it can make you feel nervous.
What was the word? It starts with an A. Apprehensive.
Good. Apprehensive.
Oh man.
Until a routine is established and new responsibilities become familiar.
Yeah.
3, technology changes so quickly nowadays that my flip phone has now become almost blank and few technicians will even repair it. Marissa, what did you have for number 3? The one that starts with obsolete. Has now become almost obsolete and few technicians will even repair it. Good. Nobody has those anymore. 4, performers on The Voice often find themselves in a blank about which celebrity vocalist to choose as their coach and mentor. They just can't decide. Owen? Good. Quandary. They cannot decide between the judges. 5, when a man and woman agree to marry, they appear before a minister or judge who will blank their marriage vows in a religious or civil ceremony. Make it official.
Oh, I put consecrate.
Good.
Okay.
Consecrate. 6, voter blank has become most notable during primary elections because it can create huge political shifts that might prove devastating on local and national levels. People don't want to care.
I put apathy.
Good. Apathy. Voter apathy. Number 7, flipping old and blank houses has become a popular and profitable business for many people.
Decrepit.
Good. So you use that context clue. Old and decrepit houses, and they need flipped. Okay, 8, on December 31st, thousands of partygoers converged in New York City, to blank in the music and dancing as they usher in the new year.
Revel.
Good, revel. To revel in the music and dancing as they usher in the new year. Number 9, before selecting a lifelong mate, one should ensure that he or she is blank spiritually, intellectually, and socially, or the relationship may not last.
Compatible.
Good, compatible. They go together. A good match. Number 10, the Capulet and the Montague families held extreme and blank toward each other that unfortunately resulted in the deaths of their children.
Could it be animosity?
Animosity, hatred. They hated each other. 11, excessive rain and abnormally cool winter blank. The young wheat shoots, causing many plants to wither and die. It ruined them, stunted their growth. Anyone have 11?
I don't have that one. Oh no.
Number 11, we're looking at 11 means to ruin, to wither.
You.
Stifle.
Stultify?
Good.
Woo.
Stultify.
Oh, stultify. There's a T in there? Oh, there is a T in there.
Excessive rain and abnormally cool weather stultified young
Stultify.
leeches.
Yoop-a-doop-doop-doop.
Number 12. When Prince died unexpectedly, many mourners left cards, flowers, and their blank at the gate entrance of his home to show their admiration and respect. Yep, condolences. When someone dies, you send your condolences, your sympathy. 13. Shirley Temple's blank personality and cherubic face lit up the nation during the dark years of the Great Depression.
Ingenuous?
Good, ingenuous, innocent,
Yoop-a-doop-doop.
and what does cherubic mean?
Isn't it like childish? Like
Just
Cupid
angel.
type thing?
Yeah. Cupid is a cherub. Okay, 14. When planning a night of toilet papering, egging, or other mischievous deeds, always consider first the blank that may ensue from such dastardly activities. What could the consequences? Payback.
I do not have that
Result.
one moment.
Someone might retaliate.
Oh, is it reprisal? Reprisal?
Yep, reprisal that may ensue from such activities. Okay, 15, the football coach blanked his offensive line for not following the play he signaled to the quarterback. They did something he did not like. So is he going to praise them?
No. Deride?
Good.
Oh, nice.
Derided his offensive line. Criticized them.
I
Yelled at them.
spelled that wrong.
16. During a graduation ceremony, the valedictorian and salutatorian are blanked for maintaining the first and second highest grade point average of the entire class.
Commended?
Good. Commended, celebrated, congratulated. 17. The blank toddler refused to sit in the corner when his mother attempted to punish him for hitting his siblings.
Recalcitrant?
Recalcitrant.
Oh, it's calcitrant? Okay, recalcitrant.
Recalcitrant toddler. 18. Many people who lost large sums of money in the 2008 stock market and housing debacle had to adhere to a blank lifestyle in order to make ends meet.
Parsimonious?
Good. Parsimonious lifestyle. 19. Some people are blank readers who enjoy a lively appetite of all types of fiction and nonfiction.
That one's omnivorous. Okay.
Omnivorous readers will take whatever they can get. Eager to learn.
Okay, there we go.
And number 20, do you remember The Most Dangerous Game? The character of General Zaroff possessed such a blank and sophisticated personality that Rainsford was totally unaware of the dangerous situation he had stumbled upon.
Suave.
Suave.
Like Batman.
Charming and sophisticated personality. Okay, leave those out and I will grab them. Let's take our first 15-minute break.
You but do boop 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 two. You you but do boop boop. Yes.
started working. Okay, let's start. If you would go to Google Classroom, under classwork, I posted
Oops.
a PDF of Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat. That's the short story we're going to be reading today. First, I'm going to show you a video about Edgar Allan Poe. He's one of my favorite authors. This video is like interesting facts about him, but it also gives you kind of his life story. So just pay attention to
Writing
this.
is not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Edgar Allan Poe's name is practically synonymous with the macabre. His poem, The Raven, is a classic of the horror genre, and his story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, which predates the first appearance of Sherlock Holmes by almost 50 years, essentially invented the trope of the analytical detective. In spite of this creative success, the circumstances of Poe's life were often bizarre and tragic. He was a textbook example of a starving artist who lived for his art, drank heavily, and died young. Today, we're going to take a look at some bizarre facts about the tragic life of Edgar Allan Poe. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel, and be sure to let us know in the comments below what historic writers you would like to hear more about. Okay, so, once upon a midnight dreary. Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston on January 19, 1809. At the time, his parents, David and Eliza Poe, were stage actors, and their profession required them to be constantly touring up and down America's East Coast. It was a relatively transient lifestyle that wasn't terribly well suited to raising a family. So in the summer of that year, the family, which included Edgar's older brother Henry, moved to New York City. This new arrangement didn't last long. 6 weeks after the move, Poe's father, who was an alcoholic, abandoned his family. Forced to support the kids on her own, Eliza moved them all to Richmond, Virginia, where she hoped to find work in the theater. In December of 1810, she gave birth to a daughter, Rosalie, but sadly, mother and child wouldn't have much time together. Eliza contracted tuberculosis and died on December 8, 1811. By an eerie coincidence, approximately 3 days later in Norfolk, Virginia, Poe's father also passed away. Edgar was only 2. With no parents left to assume custody, the Poe children were split up. Henry was sent to Baltimore to live with their grandparents, while Edgar and Rosalie were each adopted by different families in Richmond. While many believe that Allan is Poe's middle name, that's not really the case. Allan is actually the surname of John and Frances Allan, the couple that adopted Edgar in Richmond. John Allan was a relatively successful merchant who didn't have much in the way of a formal education. He did, however, have a great deal of personal wealth, which he acquired the old-fashioned way. He inherited it. Despite this, he considered himself a self-made man. Whatever the case, John didn't have much of a relationship with his ward. He felt Edgar was ungrateful for everything the Allans had done for him, and he believed the boy didn't have even a spark of affection for him. By the time Poe enrolled at the University of Virginia, his relationship with his adoptive parents had become outright hostile. John refused to provide Edgar with the money he needed to make it through the semester. Quickly running out of funds, Edgar tried to make up the difference by gambling. You can probably guess how well that went. Long story short, Poe wound up thousands of dollars in debt. It all caught up with him when his creditors finally approached John Allan himself for payment. Allan refused to pay and instead pulled Edgar, then only in his second semester, out of the college. John demanded that Edgar take a job for no pay at his trading firm. But Edgar wasn't having it. Instead, he left home and headed to Boston to follow his dream of becoming a poet. However, in what would become a trademark of many of the endeavors of his life, his plan was both underdeveloped and underfunded. At the age of 18, he spent most of his money self-publishing a pamphlet of poetry called Tamerlane and Other Stories. While the few remaining copies of this pamphlet are priceless today, it was not successful at the time. In fact, it sold so poorly that there was a time that historians didn't believe it actually existed. With no practical skills or marketable education to fall back on, Poe quickly ran out of options. Finally, in May of 1827, out of pure desperation, he enlisted in the army. To prevent his creditors from finding him, he enrolled under the alias Edgar A. Perry. Edgar A. Perry turned out to be a pretty good soldier. His reputation was for being reliable, competent, and adept at bureaucratic record keeping. As such, he quickly rose to the rank of sergeant major. In his time with the Army, Poe served at 3 separate places, including Fort Moultrie, South Carolina. This location would later serve as the setting for the work that launched Poe's career, a short story called The Gold Bug. Poe found some success in the Army, but with 3 years still left on his 5-year commitment, he grew bored. He asked his commanding officer for permission to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, but the officer refused to sign off on the request unless Poe reconciled with adoptive father John Allan. Allan at first refused. However, after the death of Francis Allan in 1829, John changed his mind and grudgingly helped Poe get into West Point. Edgar's time at West Point officially began on July 1st, 1830, and ended with a court-martial 8 months later on February 8th, 1831. While an urban legend holds that Poe was kicked out for attending a class in the nude, the truth is less amusing. The young cadet had grown unhappy at the school and deliberately attempted to get expelled. Officially, he was convicted of dereliction of duty. Leaving the Army to attend West Point required finding someone to serve out the rest of Poe's enlistment. That someone turned out to be Sergeant Samuel Graves, who agreed to finish the commitment for a fee which Poe agreed to pay. However, when it came time to settle up, Poe didn't have the money. In a letter to Graves, Edgar suggested he would try to get the funds from John Allan, but that it would take some time because Allan was a notorious drunk. Running out of patience, Graves talked to John Allan himself and showed him the letter. Enraged, Allan paid the debt and then refused to speak to Edgar again for the rest of his life. Even on his deathbed, Allan refused to meet with Poe and threatened to beat him with a cane if he didn't leave. After West Point, Poe headed to Baltimore, where he moved in with his aunt, Maria Clem, who was the sister of Edgar's deceased father, David. Also living in the house was Maria's mother, Elizabeth, and Maria's children, Henry and Virginia. The family struggled financially, but did manage to keep a roof over their heads thanks to a pension Elizabeth received from the government. Maria, for her part, was very supportive of Poe's literary dreams. In 1835, Elizabeth and Henry both died, and Poe left Baltimore for a job at the Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. A year later, when he was financially able, he sent for Maria and Virginia, who left Baltimore. On May 16, 1836, Edgar Allan Poe married 13-year-old Virginia, his first cousin. The exact nature of their relationship and whether this marriage was ever consummated is unknown and has been widely debated by historians for generations. Like his father, Poe was an alcoholic, and he was notorious for his binge drinking during his short time at college. The problem was so severe that T.H. White, the editor who hired Poe at the Southern Literary Messenger, had to quickly fire him for
There's a
drinking so much.
nice ad on the
White,
screen.
who recognized Poe's talent when sober, eventually agreed to rehire him in October of 1836. His employment was contingent on Poe maintaining sobriety. He was gone by January of 1837. In 1839, a friend of Poe named Thomas English Dunn spotted the writer drinking in the streets of New York. He described Poe as struggling in a vain attempt to raise himself from the gutter. When the men ran into each other again 3 days later, Dunn said Poe was heartily ashamed and told him that it would never happen again. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the case. Poe's drinking would become more and more severe over the course of his life and likely played a role in his mysterious death. In January of 1845, Edgar Allan Poe published a narrative poem called The Raven. The story was about a man, despondent over a lost love, being confronted by a mysterious and possibly imaginary creature. While Poe had already developed a solid reputation as a literary critic, he only had moderate success as a fiction writer. The Raven changed all that. It was wildly successful, and it made Poe famous throughout the world. The poem was widely reprinted and led to the publication of 2 separate volumes of Poe's poetry and prose. He was invited to the most exclusive clubs New York high society had to offer, and children would follow him through the streets chanting, "Nevermore." However, you can't pay rent with fame. Records show Poe made somewhere between $9 and $15 for writing the poem. Newly published editions earned him another $120 in royalties. But since he had taken a $135 advance, he never got any of it. The next year was hard. Poe gave mediocre performances on the paid lecture circuit, made unpopular attacks on establishment figures like Emerson and Longfellow, and was caught up in a scandal involving a married woman. The career momentum he had built on the Raven petered out. In May of 1846, Poe, his wife Virginia, and his mother-in-law Maria moved to a rural cottage in the Bronx. Located 14 miles outside of central Manhattan, it was the equivalent of living in literary exile. Even worse was that Virginia had come down with tuberculosis. She died January 30th, 1847. On her deathbed, Virginia made her mother promise to look after Eddie for the rest of his life. Maria would keep that promise. After Virginia's death, Poe became determined to marry his way out of poverty. He spent months exchanging letters with a widowed poet named Sarah Helen Whitman, and then in September of 1848, he showed up at her house, unannounced, to propose marriage. She declined, and Poe returned home, only to try again a month later. After that, he headed to Lowell, Massachusetts, to see another potential love interest named Annie Richmond. However, she was already married. He tried with Sarah Whitman again in November and December, and he eventually got her to agree to a Christmas Day wedding. However, Sarah's mother was wary of Poe's drinking, and she made legal arrangements to ensure he would never get a share in the family's estate. Perhaps as a result, the relationship ended before the wedding. Lucky for Sarah, too. She didn't know it, but at the time, Poe was also putting the moves on an entirely different Sarah. Sarah Royster Shelton was one of Edgar's childhood sweethearts. Poe proposed to her as well, and despite a clause in her husband's will requiring her to forfeit 3/4 of his estate if she remarried, she told him she would think about it. She never reached a decision. On October 7, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe died. Sarah found out about his passing when she read about it in a newspaper. On September 27, 1849, Poe boarded a steamboat bound for New York City. Though he had sworn to his prospective fiancée, Sarah Royster Shelton, that he wouldn't drink, it is believed that he broke this vow when the ship stopped in Baltimore on September 28. Many of the facts have been lost to history. However, we know that on October 3rd, a man named Joseph Walker sent a letter to an acquaintance of Poe named Joseph Snodgrass. The letter reported that Poe had been found in a Baltimore gutter, incoherent and in need of help. Snodgrass located Poe and immediately checked him into a hospital. The writer remained incoherent and was never able to explain what happened to him. 4 days later, Poe died. His cause of death remains unknown and has been subject to rampant speculation, ranging from a case of rabies to an attack by the brothers of a woman he was courting. Some might say it's ironic, but fitting, that the inventor of the modern detective story should leave behind such a tantalizing mystery with his own bizarre life and death. So which of these facts surprised you about Poe, and what is your favorite Poe story? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.
Okay, on Google Classroom, you probably need to refresh because I posted one PDF and then realized I don't think it was the right one. So make sure.
Are we supposed to be doing the black cat?
Yes.
Okay then.
They both said the black cat, but one was a lot shorter. This one's 14 pages. That's right. That should be the right one. So I'm just gonna have you follow along on your Chromebook so that I didn't have to waste a bunch of paper printing it out, but it's this one that starts with a cover page. We're gonna listen to someone else read it. Their voice is creepier than mine. Well, sometimes.
Sometimes.
Oh wait.
Edgar Allan.
So we're gonna listen to it, and then someone made like a short film out of the story, and it's pretty good. So we'll watch the short film and then fill out our elements chart.
What?
So make sure you are following along, paying attention. It's supposed to be like scary. All of Edgar Allan Poe's stuff is just kind of creepy. This one doesn't necessarily have like a big scary ending like some of them do. It's just kind of eerie.
Well, someone just died, casually. As you do.
The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. Performed by Jeff Clement. For the most wild yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not breathe. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me, yet I will not attempt to expound them. To me, they have represented little but horror. To many, they will seem less terrible than baroques. Hereafter, perhaps, some intellect may be found which will reduce my phantasm to the commonplace, some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive, in the circumstances I detail with awe, nothing more than an ordinary succession of very natural causes and effects. From my infancy I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derivable. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a brute which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasion to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. I married early, and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mention the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me whenever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of a fiend intemperance, had, I blush to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew, day by day, more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when by accident or through affection they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length, even Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home, much intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, when, in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a more than fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fibre of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush, I burn, I shudder when I pen the damnable atrocity. When reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty. But it was, at best, a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I plunged again into excess, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and then came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. Of this spirit philosophy takes no account, yet I am not more sure that my soul lives. That I am that perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which give direction to the character of man. Who has not, 100 times, found himself committing a vile or a silly action for no other reason than because he knows he should not? Have we not a perpetual inclination in the teeth of our best judgment to violate that which is law merely because we understand it to be such? This spirit of perverseness, I say, came to my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse of my heart, hung it because I knew that it had loved me and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense, hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, as if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. On the night of the day in which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity, but I am detailing a chain of facts and wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall, a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with very minute and eager anticipation. The words strange, singular, and other similar expressions excited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope about the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. But at length, reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon hearing the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, by someone of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through an open window into my chamber. This had probably been done with the view of arousing me from my sleep. The falling of other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the lime of which, with the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had then accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. Although I thus readily accounted to my reason, if not altogether to my conscience, of the startling fact just detailed, it did not less fail to make a deep impression on my fancy. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and during this period there came back to my spirit a half sentiment that seemed, but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin or of rum which constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. I had been looking steadily at the top of this hogshead for some minutes, and what now caused me surprise was the fact that I had no sooner perceived the object thereupon. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite, splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it from the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caress, and when I prepared to go home, the animal evidenced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but I know not how or why it was. Its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not, for some weeks, strike or otherwise violently ill-use it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing, and to flee silently from its odious presence, as from the breath of a pestilence. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery, on the morning after I brought it home, that, like Pluto, it had also been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who, as I have already said, possessed, in a high degree, that humanity of feeling which had once been my distinguishing trait and the source of many of my simplest and purest pleasures. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which it would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down, or, fastening its long and sharp claws in my dress, clamber in this manner to my breast. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from so doing, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. I am almost ashamed to own, yes, even in this felon's cell I am almost ashamed to own, that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive. My wife had called my attention more than once to the character of the mark of white hair, of which I have spoken, and which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, although large, had been originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, and which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful, it had, at length, assumed a rigorous distinctiveness of outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name, and for this, above all, I loathed and dreaded, and would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now, I say, the image of a hideous, of a ghastly thing, of the gallows. Oh, mournful and terrible engine of horror and crime, of agony and of death. And now was I indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity. and a brute beast whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed. A brute beast to work out for me, a man fashioned in the image of the high God. So much of insufferable woe. Alas, neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest any more. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, and its vast weight an incarnate nightmare that I have no power to shake off, incumbent eternally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the darkest and most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things and all mankind, while from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of a fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which, of course, would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell, dead, upon the spot, without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith and with entire deliberation to the task of concealing the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house either by day or by night without risk of being observed by the neighbors. Many projects entered my mind. At one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another, I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again, I deliberated about casting it into the well in the yard, about packing it in a box as if merchandise with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed, and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection, caused by a false chimney or fireplace that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the hole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. And in this calculation I was not deceived. By means of the crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while, with little trouble, I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. Having procured mortar and hair with every possible precaution, I prepared a plaster which could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I very carefully went over the new brickwork. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor was picked up with the minutest care. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, "Here at last, then, my labor has not been in vain." My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I been able to meet with it at the moment, there could have been no doubt of its fate. But it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. And thus for one night at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and the third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a freeman. The monster in terror had fled the premises forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but of course nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secure. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came, very unexpectedly, into the house and proceeded again to make a rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure, however, was the inscrutability of my place of concealment. I felt no embarrassment whatever. The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. I walked the cellar from end to end. I folded my arms upon my bosom and roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. Oh, the glee in my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say, if but one word, by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to relate your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." In the rabid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. I may say an excellently well-constructed house. These walls, are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch-fiend. No sooner had the reverberations of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, by a cry, at first muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman. A howl a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony and the demons that exult in the damnation. Of my own thoughts, it is folly to speak. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless, through extremity of terror and awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb.
Get close.
Is our narrator sane?
No,
So he is
There's-
insane.
there's
He
something
has
wrong with
been
him.
torturing animals. I have a literary charts just like we did with, I don't remember what we did it with. But I think you'll be able to find an example for every single one. Because we have the flashback and foreshadowing in this one. If you need to use the story, you have it.
It's the one with the card and the cop.
Oh, the pedestrian.
Yeah.
That's what it was. So fill those in. When you're done, we'll take a 15-minute break. So let's work until 11. And then at 11:15, we'll go over these together. I also need your assignments from yesterday if you haven't submitted those on Google Classroom.
That's it. Well, let's work here in the morning. And that's just like,
Greetings, students.
Hello.
Do not forget that tomorrow is Hawaiian Day. Again.
You ever gonna change it?
No, we're just going to do it 3 times.
Oh, okay.
But there's still going to be otter pops, even if you don't want to dress Hawaiian. So, you can't argue with otters. Right? Anyways, tomorrow. You can get Hawaiian, beach, fun in the sun, or, leather jacket, whatever you want.
It's cold in here.
Yes. Well, you're lucky it's hot in the other room. So,
Yeah.
I'd rather be a little cold than hot.
I'd rather be hot than cold.
Really?
Yes.
No. The first day, like in the morning, the AC wasn't even on and I was sweating.
I was freezing.
And now it's just cold in here.
Is the narrator writing this in a jail cell?
What?
Is the narrator writing this in a jail cell? Because I went back to the
Yes, he's
beginning
locked up.
and he's saying, tomorrow I'm going to die. And then I remembered, wait, isn't like the penalty for murder death?
Basically, the whole thing is a flashback, obviously, and then him writing from, he knows he's gonna die tomorrow and he's locked up.
Okay.
But once we watch the short film that I forgot about, it kind of shows, like, that he's still mad and he's in the jail, but he's still like hallucinating and seeing the cat and everything.
Okay. So the setting would be a jail cell?
Yeah. A jail cell, and then you could also put like his home, a street, he goes all over the place.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and go over them together real quick. It's 11:13.
I am alone in the room. Good times. I'm gonna have to edit this stream a lot. Maybe I can get Eddie to do it. Is Eddie awake? For those of you who don't know or are new to my channel, Eddie is my editor. Yep, barely. What? Huh? Context? Yo, you pup. The po-po reps. I'm not doing po-po uppercuts. Wait, cool. What? Shit. Okay. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. My grandma's here. She came in like at 2:30 in the morning. And then she was asleep when I got up at like 7. And she was still asleep when I left, so I won't get to see her until I come home. But she's here. She's here. My oldest brother is getting married soon, too. Like on the 19th, I believe. So that's why family's coming down. It's for the wedding. And then this Sunday is also Tobin's graduation party, which is why not this Sunday. Okay, the Sunday of Father's Day is my brother's graduation party. Because that way everyone's already down here. Yeah. Would the resolution just be when the cops show up?
Well, what happens after, what does he see?
What does he see?
He has like another hallucination.
He sees that cat in the wall.
Okay. Right.
And for flashback, the whole thing is a flashback.
Yeah.
So just put the whole thing.
Like story.
Thing.
I couldn't find any dialogue in the story.
Yeah, there was, well, except for when he was talking to the cops. That's like the only dialogue there is.
Conversation with the police. And then at the end, would they, like the resolution would be like, what do the police discover that they're able to convict him for?
The dead body.
Murder. Who did he murder?
His wife. When the cops come and see dead wife. 'Cause I ran out of room. There we go. Would the foreshadowing be when he saw the white stuff, the white mark of the like hanging place on the cats? Second
It could be that, it could be,
cats
there's 2 examples. Whenever he
chest.
hurts the animals in the beginning, he does not hurt the cat. He doesn't hear anything else. What did you, what story is, so there's another one that I have to do? There's one that, like, I attached it to that email on Friday, and the story is on Common Lit called The Pedestrian. Oh, okay. Am I just like, do I have to turn it in or rewind it? Okay, let's go over those so that then we can watch the short film when you're done. So for plot, you could have really written any event from the beginning, but what's like a 5-word summary that you could put in the plot box? Summary of the whole story.
I said alcoholic who was crazy kills his cat. Anyway.
Good. Crazy guy. Oh yeah, he is an alcoholic. Ends up killing his wife after he kills his cat, the second cat.
I put in alcoholic animal abuser goes insane after killing a cat and then wife because cat comes back.
Okay, any conflict here?
Man versus self.
Good. His descending or his ascent into madness. And then the setting, we said, you could say, because it's a flashback, he's sitting in his jail cell, his home, the street, really anywhere. Anything you're supposed to learn from this story, a theme? Maybe it's not
Violence and
necessarily-
I've just put violence or anger. I did not really put oh you should karma. Karma is a good one.
Karma, what goes around comes around, karma will come back to get you.
Karma.
If you don't watch your alcohol consumption, you might kill your wife. Okay, the mood of the story?
Surprise and shock.
Yeah, I put shocked and disgusted.
Okay. Tone?
Paranoia.
Yeah,
Good.
The whole entire thing was just paranoid.
Good. Tomorrow we'll read The Telltale Heart, and that one is also all about his paranoia and madness.
I wonder if Edgar Allan Poe was paranoid.
I think probably he's a little
I was about to say he sounds very disturbed.
because even when he started as a critic, like a literary critic, he was harsh and said like creepy, like horrible things about people. So then I think he just took those creative juices and started writing these creepy stories. Point of view,
First.
first person, but he also likes to throw in kind of an address to the reader when he says a reader will remember that. In the beginning, he's basically telling you like,
Because it sounds like he's writing down like on a piece of paper as like a confession type thing.
It's first person point of view, definitely. But Edgar Allan Poe famously likes to address his reader.
Likes to confuse people.
Right. In the beginning of, I think it's The Telltale Heart, he says, you'll probably think I'm mad, and addresses the reader right off the beginning. Okay, dialogue we said was just between he and
Talking to the cops.
police officers. Good. What is the resolution?
And the cops come and see the dead wife.
Good. So when they
You know,
show
just
up,
casual
they're
on
on
the
him.
wall.
Flashback?
The whole thing.
Yeah, I put telling his story of what happened in jail.
Good. So it starts out in jail and then he tells you, this is how I got here, this is why I'm gonna die tomorrow. Any foreshadowing, so it would be foreshadowing within this flashback,
The second cast chest.
okay?
Because it said gallows, and then I googled gallows, and it was where they hang people. So
The second cat is back. Anything else? What about in the beginning when he's talking about his treatment of the other animals?
well, I don't think that was really a foreshadowing because he's like, I didn't hurt the cat. That's more of like, okay, but we already know you're gonna hurt the cat. I wouldn't really count that as foreshadowing, though.
But if it's telling you like, oh, he's definitely gonna hurt the cat. Because he goes out of his way to be like, I don't really care about the other animals, but the cat, I'm not gonna touch the cat. And then you're like, oh, well, of course, now he's gonna hurt the cat. Characterization, any indirect or direct examples?
Direct, because he purposely tells you about like, I'm an alcoholic. I abuse animals.
Wait, which one are you on?
Characterization.
We're on the back, the first one on the back.
Yeah, he kind of characterizes himself to you. And then there are other examples of indirect that you can find with his like interactions with obviously the animals,
Yeah.
his wife.
But he like specifically tells you what's wrong with him.
Right. Symbolism.
I put the cat because black cats are
Yeah,
symbols for
black
bad luck
cat.
and death.
Good. The black cat, maybe the eyeball. Edgar Allan Poe, I think it's like two other stories. Writes about cutting out eyes. Tomorrow in the Telltale Heart, he cuts out an old man's eye.
Okay, here's the thing though. He was very descriptive when he did that, and most people, it tends to show that if people know a bit too much about doing, like when they're writing and stuff like that, if they know a bit too much, it's mainly because they've done it before. So I'm wondering whose eyeball he cut out.
He's done it. Any allusions alluding to another
I
piece?
might be wrong. I don't have my book with me, but I'm pretty sure Pluto, the name of the first cat, Pluto is actually, I'm pretty sure it's the Roman god for the Roman god of hell or the underworld.
Good.
I might be wrong though.
So even the name of the cat.
Yeah.
Black cat and Pluto.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Pluto is the Roman god for the underworld. I might be wrong.
Lots of figurative language. Did you find a specific example?
Personification, cry of fire.
Okay, cry of fire. Good. What else? Figurative language. Owen, did you find one?
No, I didn't know the name.
You can find a simile, a metaphor, personification.
Well, like in the story?
Yeah. Marissa, did you have figurative language?
Oh, I don't know if it's right, but I found a metaphor, and it said I have walled up the monsters within the tomb.
Good. Who are the monsters?
The cat.
Okay, the cats. Why does he always call the cats? Or I think it's ironic he calls the cats the monsters because who's the monster in the story?
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, you can hold on to those before you go. We're gonna watch the animated film version. It's him telling a story. And it features the cat and I think his wife. It shows his wife in it. Okay, there's the new CUs.
You said it's animated?
Yes, but it looks super real. Even though his face is real.
Tomorrow I die. Today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to tell you plainly and succinctly a series of mere household events. In their consequence, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me, and I will not attempt to start them. That perhaps some intellect more calm, more logical than my own, will see these circumstances as little more than ordinary and commonplace. For me, they have presented true horror. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals. I was never so happy as when feeding and caressing them. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, fine dog, rabbit It's a small monkey and cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and suspicious to an astonishing degree. Speaking of his intelligence, my wife, her heart was not a little tainted with superstition, regarding all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was serious upon point. I mentioned the matter for no great reason. It happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house, even with some difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when by accident or through affection they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me. For what disease is but alcohol? And at length, even Pluto was made to feel the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized it, when, in its fright at my sudden violence, it inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with its teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a fiendish malevolence gently nurtured and thrilled every fibre of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. When reason returned in the morning, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty, but it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket, the lost eye, presented its true, frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but fled in extreme terror of my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. This feeling soon gave way to irritation, and came as if to my final and irrevocable overflow the spirit of perverseness. Morning, the cool blood slipped and loosened out its neck and hurried to the limb of a tree. Hurried with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at heart. Hurried because I knew that it had loved me and because I thought it had given me no reason of offense. Hurried because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin. A deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. Every night I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The whole house was blazing. My wife, her servant, and I made our escape. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself to despair. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. About this wall, a dense crowd collected. Spooked at first. It's impossible. I saw the creature hanging from a tree and its neck was broken. There was no surroundings like it, but it's blood. But it was dead, I tell you. Dead. It killed. Once I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the act. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, The garden among the vile forms which are now habitually frequented. Another pet of the same species with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of modern infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object proposing upon a hog's head of run. I approached it. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto and closely resembling him in every respect but one. This cat had a large, though indefinite spotch of white covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. I continued my caresses. I prepared to go home, the animal evinced the disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so. Upon reaching my house, it instigated itself at once and became an immediate favourite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it rising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated. Out of a fondness for myself, rather disgusted and annoyed. Adding no doubt to my growing hatred of the beast was the discovery that like Pluto, it too had been deprived by its eyes. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down. Oh, puzzled with its long, sharp claws in my dress, clambered to my breast. Sometimes I longed to destroy it with a blow. I was yet withheld from doing so, partly by the memory of my former crime, but chiefly because this is the absolute sign of the beast. I am almost ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal has inspired me has been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to imagine. My wife had drawn my attention more than once to the mark of black hair, which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange creature and the one I had destroyed. This mark had been indefinite, but by slow degrees it had assumed rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object which I shuddered to name, for this would have warned myself of the monster had I dared. It was now the image of a hideous, a ghastly thing. Oh, mournful and terrible engine of horror and of crime, of agony and of death. Neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest anymore. During the former, the creature left me with no moment alone, and in the latter I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face. Fast, wet, and cold nightmare which had no power to shake off incumbent eternally into my heart. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things and all mankind. Well, from a sudden I had now dominable outbursts of fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself. Uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the house. The cat followed me, getting between my feet, throwing me headlong, exasperating me to madness. Lifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the animal. This blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Doing my interference to a rage more than demoniac, I burned the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith and with entire deliberation to the task of concealing the body. I knew I could not remove it from the house either by day or by night without the risk of being observed by the neighbours. Many projects entered my mind. One period I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. Another I deliberated about packing it into a box with merchandise, with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it to the house. Finally, I hit upon what I consider to be a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to put Wally up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are reported to have walled up their victims. Bending to the crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having kept deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while with a little trouble I remade the whole structure as it originally stood. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, here at least then, my labor has not been in vain. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had firmly resolved to put it to death. It appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger and forbore to present itself as it moved. It is impossible to describe the deep and blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus, for one night at least, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. Second and third night passed, and still my tormentor came not. The monster in terror had fled. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me, but there were some few inquiries to be made. These had been readily answered. I looked upon my future felicity as secure. On the fourth day of the assassination, a party of police came very unexpectedly into the house and proceeded to make a rigorous investigation of the premises. They left no nook or corner unexplored. The third or fourth time they descended into the cellar. I quivered not a muscle. My heart beat calmly. I rolled my arms about my bosom and roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. Gentlemen, if I to have allayed your suspicion, I wish you all the health. More courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, listen. The very well constructed house. In the rapid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. These walls, solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily upon the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of my wife. No sooner had the blow sunk into silence than I was answered by a cry from within the tomb. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless, with the extremity of terror and of awe. In the next, a dozen arms were toiling at the wall. The corpse stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Behind its head sat the hideous beast whose inhuman cry had condemned me. God, shield and deliver me from the fangs of the archfiend! I had walled the monster up within the tomb.
I'm pretty sure the only animated thing was the cat.
The man was animated.
Are you sure?
Yes. Unless I'm going crazy.
I think you are going crazy.
No, look at him. His face doesn't move right.
Deposited the body again. It did not make its appearance during
Like,
the night.
I think his face is.
For one night at least.
Yeah,
There?
you could see at the beginning.
Maybe like halfway through it changed. I don't know. Okay, tomorrow we'll read one more story from Edgar Allan Poe, and then we're halfway done. For 3 weeks. What?
Yeah, do you want these?
No, you can look at it.
Oh, okay.